Good morning. This is Carmine Fischetti with Georgia Department of Community Affairs. We're here today with Katelyn DiGioia with DOT. She's the State Bicycle and Pedestrian Engineer with the Georgia Department of Transportation. And this webinar today will explore how to make streets functional and safe for all users. In 2014, there were 200 pedestrian fatalities in Georgia's roads, with many of these occurring downtown. Planning safe walking and bicycling routes can both reduce fatalities and improve the aesthetics of your community. Katelyn's presentation will show you how to shape transportation policy and give you the tools you need to talk the talk with engineers and planners in your community. So today's webinar is Tools and Best Practices for Making Downtown a Pedestrian and Bicycle-Friendly Destination. And with that, I'll turn it over to Katelyn.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm really honored to get to be with y'all this morning. I'm excited to get to talk to you about something I care a lot about, making downtowns more walkable and bikeable. So I'm going to cover a few things. Why should we even be trying to increase walking and biking downtown? I'll talk about the complete streets framework for making those changes. I'll give you a quick checklist for things to do to get started for making change. I'll go through some typical roadblocks that we see and how to troubleshoot those and share a few additional resources. And I'll be really happy and excited to take all your questions at the end. I know a lot of y'all have a lot of experience with this work and have had different issues, different opportunities come up. So I'll be excited to hear about your success stories and your challenges at the end. So why should we be trying to increase walking and biking downtown? In a nutshell, when people are walking and biking in downtowns, they're ready, they're on their feet, they're ready to buy something. They're ready to learn about the history of a downtown. They're ready to meet a neighbor. It's hard to do those things when you're in a car. There's something both intrinsically valuable about being able to walk and bike, and also something that brings a lot of value to communities. So this is, you'll probably recognize this. This is Macon during a First Friday concert. This is the city of Augusta, just on a typical afternoon. A lot of people sitting at the outdoor cafes, a beautiful wide sidewalk to walk down. This is the city of Atlanta during a large open streets event, something that brings people out to flood the streets and enjoy them. And this is Savannah. You see all those ladies have shopping bags. So this is the city of Savannah, a very walkable place. So these photos are just to show this is how you want to see your downtown. None of those pictures showed a bunch of cars. They're all focusing on the people and the places in downtown. Downtowns are places where we want people to be able to walk, to be able to bike, so that they can enjoy the city and participate in the life of the city. And then I'll get into a few more specifics. Walking and biking is historically appropriate in downtowns. This is one of the original plans from the 1800s of Savannah. It was laid out in a grid way before cars were even in the picture. A lot of our downtowns in Georgia were originally built for people walking, for people moving at the speed of a bicycle, whether in a horse and buggy or in a streetcar. Our downtowns have been in a large part turned over to the automobile, but kind of the bones are there where we can take back our cities for walking and biking and still be able to move cars through. We still want people to be able to get there, get through our cities. But I'll talk more about just how to prioritize for folks walking and biking when you're in a downtown. Walking and biking is also better for business. I imagine this is something y'all care a lot about and your local businesses care a lot about. Here's a before and after picture from Washington, D.C. It was the Barracks Row project and involved an $8 million public investment in the streetscape, and then as a follow-up, there was $8 million in private investment in the following 2 years. And as a result, they've seen 32 new businesses open on this street and $80,000 new in sales tax annually. Here's one more example out of Lancaster, California. You can see the very dramatic before and after. It took a $10 million public investment, and the reason why they were able to justify making this investment is because they saw rising crime, rising unemployment, and rising vacancies on the corridor. You can see there's not even a lot of people driving out there. It really wasn't an attractive corridor. And they made this beautiful investment, and they've seen 50 new businesses open, 800 new jobs. They're down to 4% vacancies. Sales tax revenues have risen, and their crashes have even decreased, down by 86%. Just a few more notes on how walking and biking is better for business. Walking and biking projects typically create more jobs than auto-only projects. Actually, doing the construction takes more work, but usually for a better value. And in most metro areas, if you're familiar with the walk score, you can Google it if you're not. For every additional point on the walk score scale, it equates to about $500 to $3,000 more in home values in the area. And one more case study out of Washington, D.C. A study showed that neighborhoods that are walkable in D.C. have 75% higher rents than drivable suburban neighborhoods. Walking and biking, like I mentioned before, is also better for safety. When you have the kind of speeds that are conducive for walking and biking, when you have good traffic calming, when people are driving at only about 20 miles per hour in our dense urban areas, and if someone is hit, 9 out of 10 people survive when struck at 20 miles per hour. You can compare that with someone being hit by a vehicle traveling at 40 miles per hour, only 1 out of 10 actually survive, and those other 9 are usually seriously injured. So when we have good walkable downtown, slow traffic speeds, our people are a lot safer who are out walking. They're much more likely to walk because they feel safe and they are safer. It's also better for health. This is pretty intuitive, but it's also been shown with large national studies that places with the lowest levels of walking and biking on average have the highest rates of obesity, diabetes, and high blood pressure. And you know, we could spend several hours just talking about how walking and biking can impact health for the better, personal health. So not only is walking and biking good for communities from a business and economic perspective, it's also good for each individual who's able to participate in that activity. People from Georgia also want and need safe places to bike. People want safe places. Millennials, we talk a lot about millennials. Millennials want to work in areas with high quality transportation and high quality of life. But then there are also people who not only want these places, but really need them to get around. These are both pictures from Georgia. I won't say where because they're showing some bad situations. But almost 1 in 5 Americans have some type of disability, and without high quality pedestrian facilities, they're not going to be able to get around. This gentleman is riding his motor wheelchair in the bike lane because you can see that sidewalk is at such a severe slope, he'd probably topple over when he tries to cross across that driveway. So he's having to make the decision to travel in the street, even though he's really vulnerable. So it's really important that we're more and more creating places where people actually want to be and where they're able to travel safely. So one kind of framework for thinking about this, a lot of folks have heard of complete streets, and I'll frame it as it's a transportation policy and a transportation design framework. It's one approach for making our streets more walkable and bikeable, and it's something that has some good actionable items that y'all can be working on. So in general, complete streets are streets for everyone. They're designed and operated to enable safe access for all users. They're places where people of all ages and abilities are able to travel safely, regardless of how they're traveling, whether they're driving, walking, biking, or taking transit. And in a nutshell, complete streets is just the perspective that our streets are for more than just cars. We want to still accommodate cars. in downtown areas, but our streets are really valuable assets, and they have capacity for more than just moving traffic. They're really, we can really make streets for everyone. This is, I'll caveat this with saying that this is, you won't find this in a GDOT design manual. I got this from the internet, but this is a way of thinking about design in dense urban areas. We need to be prioritizing people first, people walking, the most vulnerable road users, the people we want out on our roads, walking into our shops and our restaurants. These are the people we need to be designing for. Bicyclists as well, but really with transit vehicles and motor vehicles, we definitely want to move them through our cities, but we need to be accommodating those users. We need to prioritize the design for people walking, for people biking, transit, and then motor vehicles. And this really is a shift away from how we have been designing for years and years since the advent of the automobile in the 50s. This is really going back to how we used to do design before cars were around. So there are two ways to think about complete streets. We have the policies that set us up for doing good design, and then we have the designs themselves. Policies can be adopted by cities, counties, and states, and they ensure that the public right-of-way is planned, designed, constructed, and operated to provide safe access for all users. It's not one special project, and it's not a mandate for immediate retrofit. It's not a statement saying our city is going to, by next year fix all of our problems. It's really a policy that says, as we make investments in transportation, we're going to make sure that all of those investments are focusing not just on motor vehicles, but also on how to improve the conditions for people walking, biking, and using transit. And then how those policies are implemented when we get to projects comes up in the design. The design isn't just one specific design, it's really figuring out what works in the context, whether it's the context of the whole city or even the specific context of that street. It definitely varies from region and from street to street. It's not just one, magic bullet, always do a road diet and you'll be fine. It's really context sensitive. And the designs, I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but Complete Streets designs typically exceed minimum standards. We've set most of our minimum standards based on motor vehicle needs and expectations. So now that we're trying to do more, we're going to need to exceed our minimum standards. And now there are some good guidance documents out there that point you to what can really work for people walking and biking, but we're going to have to go beyond the traditional manuals and the traditional resources that a lot of us are used to using. So I'll talk about that in a little while as well. This is just pointing out, like I mentioned, that complete streets vary by context. All of these streets could be considered complete for where they are. So now just a couple things for getting started, a couple things that you can be working on that you might already be working on, or things you might want to consider. So first, you can do a quick assessment. If you don't already know, it's really important to know what resources and policies that your community has in place already. Do you have a complete streets policy? Do you have a bicycle and pedestrian plan? Have you ever had a bicycle and pedestrian plan, either for your city, for your county, or for your region? If it's a regional or a county plan, does your city or downtown show up in that plan? Do you have an ADA transition plan? Do you need an ADA transition plan? And do you have any local champions or local advocates? Do you have a local city council person who really cares about this? What are your assets in the community for improving walking and biking? And then it's really important to develop a framework for where you want to go as a community. It's important to establish a shared vision for walking and biking. If it's not already established, bringing people together to talk about why walking and biking is important to your community can go a long way in starting to make changes. One way this can be done is integrating walking and biking into the vision of your downtown development association, or just seeing how walking and biking aligns with the vision that you already have, or if it doesn't align, if you'd like to consider changing that. Does walking and biking fit into the development association's mission and strategies? Or the cities, if the city has a vision statement, does walking and biking fit into that vision statement? It doesn't have to specifically say, you know, we want a walkable, bikeable community, but maybe it says something like, you know, we want a more livable community, or we want a place where people can thrive. And then you can make that connection that walking and biking can help fulfill that vision. A relatively quick win can be deciding that your community wants to develop and adopt a complete streets policy, because it's a framework that really broadens how locals plan and use their transportation dollars. It can be a really good way to bring people together to talk about why biking and walking is needed in a community. So the process of developing and adopting that complete streets policy will really help you establish that shared vision if you don't already have one. And then also developing or updating a local bicycle and pedestrian plan. A work plan that actually shows, you know, this is where we have the biggest gaps in our infrastructure for walking and biking, and this is what we want to do about it. It shows you where you want to go. And then finally, another great way to get started is figuring out where do you have room for improvement. The bike-friendly community program and the walk-friendly community program are both really great frameworks for assessing where your community is at and where else you might want to improve. I've been talking a lot about the transportation perspective, complete streets, and how we build our roads up for walking and biking, but there are also a lot of things you can be working on that don't necessarily have to do with transportation. These programs help you focus and see specific actions for what your law enforcement could be doing, how you could be educating folks, how you could be partnering with other organizations to educate folks. We talked about the engineering and the transportation, but these programs also guide you with how to evaluate your programs, and also a little bit distinct from education, also points to different encouragement programs, having those walk to school days, those bike to work days, programs of that sort can be a really great way to start a conversation in a community if you're not already doing any kind of encouragement activity. But that can be a really great way if you're not ready, you know, to build 10 miles of sidewalks and do road diets in all your roads. It might make more sense to start with just a bike to work day where you give people granola bars when they show up. These programs have just a lot of different things you can be working on, and see kind of how you stack up against communities nationally that get the designations. If you decide to pursue filling out an application, you can become a bike-friendly community or a designated walk-friendly community, and you get a nice sign that you can put up in your community, and folks see it when they come in and can see, oh, this is a silver walk-friendly community. Maybe I should park my car and get out and walk around. So it's they're both good programs, and we're trying to get folks around the state to look into them and possibly pursue getting the designations if they're ready. And now I'll talk about how to troubleshoot some roadblocks. Maybe some of y'all have tried to implement a complete streets policy, or tried to implement a road diet, or maybe you tried to implement a streetscape project, or tried to eliminate some parking so you could build a wider sidewalk, and you might have run into problems along the way. And roadblocks might be caused by local citizen resistance, local business resistance, local government resistance, or maybe even GDOT resistance. So at the end, when we're taking questions, if you have other examples of resistance you've seen and want to talk through that, I'd be happy to do that as well. These are some categories of resistance I've seen and experienced. Sometimes you might have this great vision, or your city might have even established what you thought was a shared vision for improving walking and biking, but then you go to do a project and all these people show up and they're asking, what are you doing? And how could you do this to our community? Even though you think sidewalks might be a great idea, not everyone always does. Some people, you might have heard them called NIMBYs or bananas. Folks that just are very concerned about changes, and a lot of times that process of locals coming, usually when locals see issues with projects or policies we want to propose, we can make those projects and policies better by engaging with folks and hearing their concerns and parsing out what's a concern that can help improve a project and what's just a concern that I don't want anything to happen. But a lot of times mixed in with all that noise is some really good constructive feedback. So I mentioned on here having a citizens advisory committee can help kind of pave the way for when you do a project. You already have folks that you've heard from, you've heard their concerns, you're already integrating those concerns into the project process. You can gain a lot of consensus through the planning process, whether it's making your local bike ped plan or developing the complete streets policy. Getting plenty of local input in every planning process is really important. But you might find even when you have a plan and you finish it and then you go to do the project, you're probably still going to get pushback, even though you had done the plan. So having ongoing informational meetings about a plan, about that bike ped plan, and about the community's vision for having a more walkable, bikeable downtown can be really helpful. A small city in Metro Atlanta has been hosting monthly events where they talk about, why, what's the importance of street trees, and then the next month they'll do one on, we did one a couple months ago, helping folks understand, how to navigate GDOT's processes, things like this to help local folks who care about projects. They're the people who are going to show up at your infrastructure public meeting before the project happens. And if you take the time to make those people your allies before you show up to build a project, that can be really helpful and productive. Another group of folks you might get resistance from is local businesses. Roads are really important to businesses, so when you're proposing changes, then your local businesses are going to have questions. They might be really resistant to those changes, whether it's taking out a travel lane or adding parking or removing parking, or widening a sidewalk, or making a sidewalk more narrow, or adding parking meters. Businesses have very legitimate concerns about these things. And again, it's helpful to gain consensus ahead of time through the planning process, and be engaging these folks when you're planning. But then also something we've seen be successful here in Georgia is to bring two different opportunities. Offer to bring folks to another city, a peer city, where a similar project has already been implemented, whether it's in Georgia or just over one of our borders. You can work with me or work through your networks to find out where a similar project has been done that was successful, and you can bring those folks over to take a look. And then another opportunity is to do a pilot project. If you see in this picture an example of something called back-in angle parking or reverse angle parking. If this is something you want to implement on your downtown Main Street in the long term, maybe do it on a side street initially. The city of Macon did it first in front of their public works office. They did it on a side street just to kind of show folks how it worked and that it could work. And then now they've implemented it on another street that does have businesses on it. So if you have a good idea, if your community has an idea that's worth pursuing, but you're getting resistance, then look for some creative opportunities to gain consensus. And again, not every, back-in angle parking might not be the solution for your neighborhood or for your community. That's not why I'm showing it. It's definitely going to be different. The pieces of the projects will be different everywhere, but you can usually find a good example of somewhere where it's worked. It's similar to business resistance. You might also get local government resistance. Again, looking to peer cities, try to frame the conversation and how walking and biking can help with their agenda. Again, they might have, a desire to improve livability or to increase the amount of businesses downtown. Whatever their agenda is, try to talk about how walking and biking can help with their agenda. And you can also work, if you do have one sympathetic council member or one sympathetic person in your local government who does want to see more walking and biking, try to work with them and learn from them how you can gain more consensus with the rest of the council or the rest of the local government. And you can also start with low-hanging fruit. That's going to be different in every community. For some communities, the low-hanging fruit might be doing a road diet kind of on the outskirts of town. It might be passing a complete streets policy that's, just a policy. It's not a mandate for that immediate retrofit. So that might be the low-hanging fruit, or just identifying what you can do in the context of where you're at, and then see how you can grow from there. And then finally, you might face GDOT resistance. I know that many downtown main streets are state routes. I've heard people, I've been in meetings, and we'll kind of get to a point and someone will say and now we should address the elephant in the room, which is the giant state route that goes through our downtown. It's like, yes, we definitely need to address that. So a lot of folks want to do things, want to do traffic calming, want to do road diets, and are, at GDOT we're learning to do more. We're learning to be more flexible, but we still have design policies and expectations that are very auto-oriented, and we do have a commitment to moving auto traffic across the state, including long-distance trucking, but we're learning more and more to take a complete streets approach. We do have a complete streets policy for the state. It means that every project GDOT does, we're thinking not just about the car, but also about how do we move people by walking and move people by biking on the projects that GDOT is doing. Our complete streets policy doesn't initiate new projects, and it doesn't dictate how we deal with local requests, but it does give good guidance to the projects that GDOT has programmed and that GDOT's implementing. But with our main streets that are also state routes, it's really important to work with your district office. If you have requests for new crossings, if you have requests for different traffic calming devices, if you're interested in doing a road diet or adding parking or removing parking, it's really important to work with the district office, and you're also more than welcome to work with me. A lot of my job is helping our local district offices understand the benefits of biking and walking and projects that encourage biking and walking, and that also accommodate people using cars and people shipping truck traffic across the state. So there are flexibilities in GDOT's policies. We have a design variance process. A lot of my work is to try to make GDOT's policies more conducive to doing this kind of work, but in the meantime, we're able to seek flexibilities, and it's also really important to have a local vision for biking and walking. If you're coming to GDOT and asking for a change, if you're asking for a permit to do a project that's going to make your downtown more walkable and bikeable, then GDOT's a lot more likely to grant that permit or try to figure out the best solution and engage in that dialogue if your community has a strong vision for how it wants to be more walkable and bikeable. If your community is going to support these changes, and if your community can help negotiate the local questions and possible local pushback to making the changes. The GDOT district office and our central office will be a lot more able to kind of dive into figuring out how to make it work if your community really wants to make it work. So I'm happy to answer more questions about that process, but that's GDOT politics in a nutshell. So now on to a few more resources. We've talked about some resources already, but a few more things that you might find useful as you're diving into this world of walking and biking. Here's a map. I mentioned working with the GDOT districts. This is a map of the GDOT districts. I imagine most of y'all are connected in some way with either a GDOT district or a GDOT area office, but I'm also happy to help you get connected to your local GDOT folks, and depending on which county you're in one of our 7 districts. And then also I'm a resource as well. I mentioned that there are traditional design documents that GDOT still refers to, but GDOT also now references the Urban Street Design Guide and the Urban Bikeway Design Guide. These are put out by NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials. So these guides are very city-oriented, and they help paint a picture of what can be done in cities from an infrastructure perspective. They're both available for free online. So if you want to kind of delve into the details of, well, what could this cross-section look like, or what are my options when I have an awkward like a 5-point intersection, how can that be retrofitted to make it better for walking and biking? These guides provide a lot of great context and detail for that, and also point to case studies all throughout the US. And these guides are also, they're compatible with the more traditional guides. So they're describing kind of how to go beyond those minimum standards, but in a large part they're compatible with the traditional design documents. There's also the National Complete Streets Coalition. If you're interested in pursuing a complete streets policy or want to see how other communities have done it, there are a lot of great resources on the National Complete Streets Coalition website, which is part of Smart Growth America, which you might be familiar with already through your work. They have a lot of great resources on their website. Also, if you're interested in reading more of a novel, these are some books that you may have heard of. I just wanted to show these in case you like to read. You might want to ask for one of these for Christmas this year as a holiday present. Interesting books if you're into urban design. And there are also a lot of great organizations here in Georgia. Georgia Bikes, PEDS, and the Georgia Trail Summit all provide great resources, great training. Each of these organizations has a summit each year that everyone's welcome to attend. They're great places to network with other professionals out the state who are doing kind of the boots on the ground work to make their communities more walkable, more bikeable. And with the Trail Summit, folks who are implementing trails in their communities. So great organizations, great if you need that advocacy perspective. All of these organizations are also helping to build up local advocates. So if you do know of a local advocate in your community, or you would like to encourage someone to be a local advocate, you could connect them with these organizations. There are also some professional organizations nationwide, the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals. We have a Georgia chapter, the Congress for New Urbanism, and even AARP. All these organizations are really champions for urban living, for walking and biking. AARP might be a more surprising partner, but they really see the value of complete streets and see the value of creating places where people can age in place. So they have a lot of great resources as well on their Livable Communities website. And then finally, I'm definitely a resource for you as well. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time. And now we'll be able to take some questions.
All right. Before we get started, I kind of have one of my own questions for you, if that's all right. I mean, we talked before, or when you first started, you kind of talked about, oh, you know, it's good to see what your city's policies are, and, you know, how, I mean, because first, before you can figure out where you want to go, you got to know where you are. You know, with what you do in the state, has there been any examples that kind of stand out in your mind of like, oh, that was a really great policy to implement, or oh, that was a really great idea? And you know, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot,
Sure, no, that's fine.
but that's what I was thinking. I was like, wow, I wonder if there's a great example out there that I'm not even aware of that you know, could really play into what we're talking about today.
Yeah, I already mentioned it's Avondale Estates that does the monthly community forums on creating a more livable Avondale. They have a organization called Second Century Avondale, focused on how to bring them into the second century of their cityhood. The city of Macon fairly recently launched it's called the Pedestrian Fatality Review Board.
Really?
So they saw a very specific challenge, and there is a very specific challenge in Macon surrounding pedestrian fatalities. So they created kind of a cross-agency task team to address that specific problem. And they really, this is the only one I know of that's happening in the state where they're really bringing together law enforcement, their local government, the local school board, the local health organization, health district, and the public works and city planners and the mayor to sit together regularly
all
and
in
talk
the same
about,
room and say,
and talk about how they're going to fix this, and they're drafting a plan and a framework to address that. And they're actually planning and intending to take a Vision Zero approach, which isn't something I talked about in this presentation, but Vision Zero has to do with making a community statement that you're not going to tolerate any pedestrian fatalities, or any roadway fatalities or injuries, and then usually taking the approach of making it safe for people walking, because when roads are safe for people walking, they're safe for everyone. So Macon's taken the lead on that. I'd love to see that in more places in the state. I know that some cities are so small that they don't have any pedestrian fatalities, but they're usually still injuries. Vision Zero is another good framework to kind of frame this work in.
And I would say even in the communities that don't have a lot of pedestrian fatalities, the challenge there is that one fatality period can shake the community to the core, you know, because they are so connected, because people know each other so well. And I've seen in certain situations, even where I've lived, where sometimes accidents happen, and sometimes it's preventable, but sometimes an accident is an accident, and it's also finding a balanced approach to what can we do to help prevent this from the future, but also making sure that we're not overreacting at the same point, that we're reacting in an appropriate way, and addressing the issues that we can address, and also realizing that some things, just nature may be out of our control in certain scenarios. And I know that Macon has embraced something that some of the national programs have recommended, where like once or twice a year they close certain blocks off in the downtown, and it's just pedestrian, so it's like everybody just walks everywhere for like a Sunday, and I think from what I've heard, they've had a lot of fun with that. That people have really kind of gravitated towards that, and it's not something they do all the time, but when they do it, they get a really great response from it.
Yeah, open streets events, or what those are called, and there are some great resources online too for figuring out how to do that in your community, and that can be a really great way to build local advocacy as well. You get people out and enjoying a city by walking and biking, and they think, okay, I want to do this on a Monday now too. Like I'm not going to take over the whole street, but you can leverage that to help build your community's capacity for having more walking and biking.
Definitely, and I think it's something, if that's a goal for you to have more pedestrian friendly, to kind of do road diets and stuff, it's almost like a fun thing you could do as a trial to see how the community would embrace it, what the impact would be, and kind of be able to kind of gain some support locally, not only from just like the local government, but also those in the community, and kind of go from there. So one of the questions we have says, can DOT sequence traffic lights so that pedestrians crossing the road do not have traffic turning into them, and this could potentially cut down on fatalities and injuries?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is yes. You would have what's called a protected only phase for the left turners, so it'd be making it so that folks can only turn left when they have a green arrow. It's also possible to prohibit right turns on red. If you want to protect folks from that right turning traffic. That's definitely not the default for GDOT, but it's a conversation that can be had about an intersection where there's been a history of crashes, or where you see the potential for crashes as you're increasing walking. Signal timing is really important. I'll talk about a couple other tools you can use. There's also what's called a leading pedestrian interval, which is something that we're doing a lot more with our District 7 office here in Atlanta, and I'd love to see it get implemented more throughout the state. It gives the traffic lights are all red, but the pedestrian phase starts a few seconds ahead of the corresponding motor vehicle phase. So it's like the pedestrian gets a head start to get out into the intersection, and then they're a lot more visible, and the folks turning are a lot more likely to see them. That cuts down, I want to say, on something like 70% of left turning vehicle pedestrian crashes. So that's another thing folks can be asking for or implementing on city streets. There's also something called, you might have heard of, a pedestrian scramble, which is where the motor vehicle traffic is stopped in all directions, and then pedestrians can cross. They get the cross phase for every direction, so it basically means people could cross diagonally if they wanted to. They can just cross wherever they want. It's fun.
That makes me think of like that really big intersection, where is it like over in Japan or Turkey or something like that, where it's kind of like a free-for-all, like all the traffic stops all at once and people are going like diagonal and sideways. You don't have to like follow the traditional like I'm going to walk to the left and then I'm going to go straight, and then like how you have to like make the loop all the way around. Kind of gives you that freedom to cut corners a little bit.
Yeah, and that's great for like extremely high pedestrian volume intersections. I wouldn't recommend it in like every place, because then you typically have to wait longer to get that ped phase. It only comes up like every other instead of how people get to cross in one direction and then cross in the other direction. But it's a cool thing you can do with signal timing. And I'll add that we see a lot of, and this is a little bit more in the suburban rural areas than our downtown urban areas, but we see a lot of pedestrian fatalities near intersections, not near signalized intersections, but not actually at the signal. A lot of times people feel safer crossing just a little bit down because they don't have to deal with that turning traffic and they don't have to wait. A lot of times on state routes, the signal timing is such that the main line is able to go for a very long time, and that side street only gets to cross if there's actually someone there waiting to cross, or it just comes up. It takes a lot more time for that side street phase to come up. So people don't like waiting and they don't like the turning traffic. So they'll cross nearby, but it's still really hard to make a judgment call when you have really cars that can come up really, really quickly. So people are hit and killed a lot of times near intersections, but not in the crosswalk. So especially in downtown areas, finding a balance between giving time to whichever street's considered the main line, the one that carries more traffic, but also it's important to really frequently serve the side street so that people have lots of opportunities to cross the main line, whether it's in a car or by walking. And that encourages people to actually cross at the crosswalk rather than crossing near the crosswalk. And in downtown areas, there's more flexibility to actually do that and kind of finesse that timing to give more priority to the side street than what's traditionally been given. So there's our signal timing lesson for the week.
So if someone, or the local government or the Main Street manager want to work with the local government and they think that there's a potential opportunity to do this, what is that first step? Like, do they reach out to their local contact, or is that kind of where you would start?
Yeah, and for city streets, local governments, the local public works typically would be controlling the signal timing. If it's on a state route, a lot of times the locals actually have responsibility for the signals even when it's on a state route, but it just depends on what the local agreements are. So you can work with the GDOT district to find out, who's actually out there doing the signal timing, when could it potentially be changed, and the work might be done either by the GDOT district or it could potentially just be done by the local government itself.
Okay, interesting. Our next question says, does the DOT district offices have bike and pedestrian staff?
So no, they don't. I'm the only full-time bicycle and pedestrian engineer for GDOT in the central office. But I'm in the traffic operations office in the central office, and each district does have a traffic operations office. So I work a lot. I work with all the different offices within the districts, but I work a lot with the traffic operations office, and depending on the district, but really all throughout the state to some extent, our traffic ops offices are knowledgeable, and they either really, really care about biking or walking, or they know they're supposed to care. So we have some good champions all throughout the state in GDOT, and a lot of my job is making sure all of the almost 4,000 employees that do work for GDOT can do their jobs better for people walking and biking.
Awesome. Carmen, I saw you taking furious notes over there. Do you have any questions?
We spoke before the presentation about some success stories around the state and some simple first steps that a city could do, but the most likely scenario in a Main Street city is you've got a downtown, maybe a downtown square or something, and you've got a state route that runs right through the heart of your downtown. And if you want to do some of these things that we see related to complete streets, what are some ways that local communities can exert some control over their own situation in downtown?
I guess just reiterating a little bit of what we talked about before, having the plan of what local folks want, whether it's revamping an existing bike ped plan or starting a new one. That can be really helpful for starting a conversation with GDOT folks. We didn't talk at all about funding, which I know is a question a lot of folks have. How do we actually pay for this? A relatively quick way to get started, if funding is available, locals can pay for work that's done on the state route system also. You just get a permit from GDOT. It's called an encroachment permit. You can say you want to build a new sidewalk along a state route in your downtown. You pursue an encroachment permit with the GDOT district. They would approve the permit, and the local government could do the work. And you know, I mentioned before, sidewalks tend to be less controversial, but they can still be. Not everyone thinks you should be spending their tax dollars on sidewalks. But if a local another way that we've seen some success and some struggles with throughout the state is working with GDOT's repaving schedule. So when you do a repaving, that's a good time to change the cross section of a road. If you had 5 lanes before, you could bring it down to 3 lanes with bike lanes and wider sidewalks. If you had 4 lanes before, you could bring it down to 2 lanes with a center turn lane. So that can be really challenging, but if GDOT repaves the state routes through downtowns, so when that road is up for resurfacing, if the locals have a plan for how they would like for that road to look in the future, and they can do a traffic study to justify, or explain what the trade-offs are between motor vehicle traffic and increased biking and walking safety and capacity, then that can be a really good conversation to have with, because that can be really controversial. So that trying to make a change when GDOT's doing repaving anyways is relatively inexpensive for the locals, but it does take a lot of coordination, and it can either show that your community is ready to make a change, or if it falls flat, maybe show that you have some more work to do with capacity building at the local level.
Yeah,
so.
And I mean, that's a great suggestion, because if they're already going to be doing something, that's a perfect opportunity to take advantage of maybe retweaking or reworking. But like you said, you have to have your ducks in a row. You have to have an idea as far as where you are, where you want to go, what that would take, and make sure you have not only the elected official support, city, county, but that you have the local support that, locally people would be willing to embrace that and be supportive of those changes. I think that's really important, though. So often we don't start thinking about that stuff until it's too late, and then this opportunity is here, and we have to kind of throw stuff together and really try and push it through the pipeline and make it work. But I think it just really goes to reiterate how important that whole planning process is and everything.
Yeah. And from our end at GDOT, I'm working with our maintenance office and with our districts to try to push out our maintenance schedule, because a lot of times it's maybe there's not a plan at the local level, but they also might not. There might be a timing problem also, because the locals just don't know that we're about to repave. So that also has resulted in a lot of missed opportunities. So I'm trying to work on a policy where we push out our maintenance schedule, which is always subject to change and likely to change, but that we're pushing it out more regularly so that folks can be looking for those opportunities.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I think there was a lot of great information. I always love it when I can listen to something and learn and take something away. And I think that, this is one of those areas that, especially when it comes to working with DOT, it's just not as familiar to our program managers, and the resources that are out there and the literature that's out there and the organizations that are out there to support it. And so for us to be able to be more aware of those potential partners in the field and where we can start. I think that this is just an invaluable discussion for us to have. So thank you for working with us today to put together this webinar. It was exciting to listen to.
Definitely. Thank you all for being on the webinar.
And I guess that's it for us today. So we will see you guys later, and this will be uploaded to our YouTube channel later this week. So thank y'all, and have a good day.